how to export a piece of equipment into Canada. So this video will be of interest to Canadian buyers who want to bring something into Canada from US, or US equipment dealers that are maybe just getting started and they're not sure how to proceed getting the equipment to the buyer in Canada. Well, first off, for as far as US customs is concerned, any self-propelled machine, such as an excavator, dozer, pipe layer, they're all considered a vehicle. And so you have to follow export procedure for vehicles. It doesn't matter if it's a car or an excavator, it's the same procedure. And it slightly varies. I have a page open here on my computer. It slightly varies depending on whether you are a US company or, let's say, Canadian company. If you're a US company, you can prepare the export documentation yourself using the automated export system, AES, where you have to file export information, and once the filing is done, you receive a reference number known as internal transaction number, ITN. And the carrier that moves this piece of machinery must have the ITN number in order to export the vehicle or the piece of equipment. And also it's preferable to give the carrier a copy of the email. Basically, when somebody, you or somebody that you hire, they do this filing in the AES system, you have to do it 72 hours before the actual time and day when the machinery will be crossing the border. They require 72 hours, 3 days, to give them advance notice. And so when you do the filing, or when the agent does the filing, usually you get back an automated email confirmation stating that the filing was done, because that piece of paper shows the date and time when you filed it. And quite often, when I was a carrier, US Customs wanted to see that proof of filing, not just the ITN number, the internal transaction number, but they wanted to see that email. But the reality is that not all border crossings issue that automated email. And so if you don't have it, you don't have it. You just tell the officer, hey, that particular border crossing, they don't issue that email. Because I was arguing with custom brokers about this, and they said, well, this one, they don't give it to us, because when you do the filing, you have to tell them which port you're going to cross at, right? And each port has a specific email for vehicle export documentation. So if you are a US company or US citizen and you have EIN number, right? So you can do it yourself on this automated export system, AES Direct. And then once you get your ITN, you give it to the carrier and everything is good. Now, also, as a US citizen or US based company, you can hire agent, such as a freight forwarder, a freight broker, or customs broker, and they will do this filing on your behalf. And that once that filing is done, they will give you that ITN. So you see, for US based individuals and companies, they have a choice. They can either do it themselves or they can hire an agent. Now, for Canadians or any non-US residents or foreign companies, you cannot do the filing yourself. You have to hire and authorize a US agent, either a freight forwarder, but US, based in US, freight forwarder, customs broker, or freight broker, right? and you have to give them your passport number. Instead of an EIN, you give them your foreign passport number, and once the filing is done, they give you this ITN, the reference number. Now, what's very important, and quite often what was the issue when I was a trucker trying to cross the border with this equipment. Now, this only applies to used equipment. New equipment is much easier to bring in if it's brand new, but used one requires this procedure. And the paperwork required, it's either a title or ownership, if there is one. If there's no title, they want to see a bill of sale. If there's no bill of sale, they want to see manufacturer's certificate of origin, or MCO. Now, what many folks are confused about, they don't understand that a piece of paper scanned and attached to an email and then sent to the carrier, it's not an original, right? Like quite often I would ask people, I need original documents. And when I'm talking to a shipper or, a freight broker, when I was trucking myself, right? And they say, yeah, sure, we'll email it to you. When you email it to somebody, it's not an original document because, yeah, I have a color printer. I can print it out, but it's not going to work. Well, if you don't have original documents, if the carrier does not have original documents, chances of success are about 80% because it depends on the officer, on the mood of this said officer. Sometimes they'll let it slide and let you cross with copies. But other times, like 20%, what happened to me, they'll tell the carrier, goodbye, come back when you have proper documentation. And so usually the best policy is to have these documents shipped by a courier to the pickup location. And then you just tell the driver, the carrier, that please remember to pick up the package at the shipper's office. And that's like the best scenario. After I'm loaded, I remind the shipper that once I'm done chaining and stuff like that, I'm going to come back to the office to pick up the documents. And they give me this big yellow envelope. Usually it looks like this, right? And inside there'll be those valuable documents, either the MCO or bill of sale or title. But customs will see right away if there's a copy, right? If it's, let's say it's printed, they will see the signature, that the signature is not real, that it's not genuine handmade signature. And but the easiest way is when the shipper is also the seller, right? Because quite often seller is in Chicago, Illinois, but I'm picking up the machine in Tennessee, and so they have to courier the documents to the Tennessee location. But when the seller is the shipper, like it happened a couple of times to me, they have it on the computer, right? So the guy prints it out, he signs it in his hand, and that's the original, and he gives it to me. So it doesn't have to be certified or notarized, as long as the customs can see the original signature, because they're very smart about this. You cannot, you can never pretty much, scam your way through this saying that, hey, that's an original signature. They will see, they will know. They're smart people. So that's as far as the documentation is concerned, right? So 72-hour notice through AES, Automated Export System. It's called actually AES Direct. There's a website, you have to register. I'm pretty sure it's for free if you're a US company or US citizen, right? But if you're a foreign company or foreign entity, you have to hire a US freight forwarder broker to do the filing on your behalf. Then you get the ITN. You get the genuine original documents to the carrier together with the ITN number and preferably with the automated email confirmation that the filing was done with the date and time when it was done, so that CBP knows, okay, let's say today, November 30th, So at 2 o'clock, that's the end of the 72-hour waiting rule. You cannot cross before. Now, what's interesting about the 72-hour rule is that they count weekends and holidays. Like even the office, usually the export office on the US side is only open like Monday through Friday. But let's say if your broker or your agent does the filing on Friday, they still gonna count Saturday and Sunday. So let's say if you file Friday at 3 p.m., so Saturday is one day, Sunday is second day, Monday 3 p.m., that's going to be 72 hours. So the carrier can cross after 3 p.m. on Monday, right? Now, and the way it works, like normally, carriers have to stop only on the opposite side of the border, right? So let's say if I go from Canada to US, I only stop on the US side, right? If I go from US to Canada, normally I only have to stop on the Canadian side. I pass through US customs, I don't have to stop there. But when you export used machinery, the carrier must be instructed to stop, right? With all these proper documents after 72 hours. Usually there'll be a sign that says like export office or something like that. And they don't do this at every crossing, so you have to find that export office. Like for example, when I was in Ontario, there was no export office in Buffalo, but there was one at the Lewiston Bridge, which is just north of Buffalo, right? So if I had a used machinery, I had to go through that crossing, Lewiston Bridge, Queenston, Lewiston. And folks over there were very strict. Last time I tried to move a big crane, they just kicked me out because I didn't have, my customer did not give me original documents. Now, so the carrier has to stop on the US side to complete the export procedure, and then once that is done, once the paperwork is stamped, usually they have a special stamp that says export is authorized. You're going to stamp your paperwork, and then you cross the bridge. Usually it's a bridge, right? And then you deal with Canadian customs, but that's like just customs, right? That's not the export. Today we're talking about the export of equipment. Now, another very important requirement, which people often overlook, is the machine will be inspected. Like, let's say, especially in this Queenston, Lewiston location, there's parking there near the office. You park there, and then you go inside, and and the carrier puts all the paperwork, required paperwork, like bill of sale or title or MCO, together with their passport, the driver, in a special tray, and then they sit in a little room and they wait for their name to be announced, and then they go there, and if everything is okay, the officer would say, meet me at the truck where you parked. And then you go there, and what they do is, first off, they check if everything was done, on the computer, right? Everything is cool. They just meet the driver in the parking lot, and the first thing they do, they check the VIN number against the paperwork. And secondly, they check if the machine is clean or dirty. And believe it or not, it's very important. It's the same as delivering a machine to a seaport. They will not accept, let's say, an excavator where there's baked dirt inside the tracks. And as a carrier, I cannot tell you how many times I had to argue with shippers and brokers about this. They just, we move it all the time like this, don't worry. What they don't realize is that, yeah, inside the country, in US or inside Canada, if the machine goes, let's say, from Chicago to Houston, it's one thing. But when it goes into Canada, there is special requirements. So the machine must be clean. It has to do with bacteria, with all these microorganisms in the soil, right? They don't care if your trailer is dirty as heck. If there's dirt on the trailer, they don't care. But they care about the piece of equipment. It must be clean. And the problem with that is that if the shipper has no way of washing the machine, or they forgot, or they just say, hey, we don't have any washes here, you know. And let's say you leave, the carrier leaves, right? But let's say the carrier, me, I know that the machine is very dirty. I know that I will have problems at the border. And quite often equipment, it's oversized, right? So it's not very safe to go through a truck wash, you know, when you're very tall or very wide, right? It's you can hit something, you can damage the machine. So I was always pushing shippers and customers to make sure there's some kind of a mobile wash, pickup truck, whatever, present at the shipper, right? Like the best scenario, like a couple of shippers I dealt with, they have a, you know, like a barn, like a wash right there, right? So you load, you put a couple of chains on, you go there, the guy rinses everything off, cool. Because sometimes what they do is even the shipper, they have the wash, or they call the mobile wash guy, let's say on the weekend, and the carrier is coming on Monday. But I I thought, you know, something like this would not happen, but they do it. Like they wash the machine and then they park it in the dirt. Like, you know, it's one thing when the yard is all gravel or, you know, paved, but no, it's like dirt, right? And, you know, if it's an excavator, as soon as it walks, I don't know, 10 meters to the trailer, because, you know, quite often you cannot just park the trailer right at the machine, right? So it's still gonna go over dirt and it's gonna absorb all that dirt. If it goes 10 meters, 30 feet, that's it. It's dirty again. Happened to me 2 or 3 times, you know. And I said, why you guys wasted the time and money to wash it and then you parked it, you know, in the dirt? Like a couple of times I showed up and they had a paved part of the yard and then they had a dirt part of the yard. And so these guys was this time they were smart, so they washed the machine and they parked it on the paved portion of the yard of the dealer. And then I just backed as close as I could, unhooked my RGN, and the machine just went from pavement right onto the trailer, right? But when it's in the dirt, you have to argue with them and make them wash the machine again, or if it's the first time, you know, just first time, right? But after it's loaded. Once it's loaded, then they wash it, then everything is good. But in my 8 years of dealing with equipment and machinery, I was turned back as carrier. I was refused export 3 times. And it's not a very pleasant experience because they say, no, the machine is dirty, go back and come back when it's clean. And quite often there's no washes anywhere there. But the biggest problem is that even if the carrier can find a mobile wash service, where do you wash it? They will not be allowed to wash it, let's say, at a truck stop, because what do you do with the dirt, right? They're not gonna pick up dirt after themselves, and so the truck stop, you know, there'll be a argument about this. So they're only allowed to wash either on their property or if it's a private property like the shipper, right? And that's why I always recommend to do whatever you can to pick up a machine that's already washed, you know, or let's say usually they do like the big wash and then they load and then they do a final rinse, because then that's the property of the shipper. They can call a mobile service, but once you leave the shipper and you're somewhere at a truck stop, nobody will come and wash the machine, you know. And I'm focusing on this so much because it can be a big cause of stress for the carrier, and it can jeopardize the entire export procedure just because you have dirt inside the tracks. If it's a wheeled machine, you know, like a wheel loader, usually it's not a problem because usually wheels or tires, they don't pick up so much dirt, right? But the excavators anything on tracks, like screens, those, chippers, excavators, crawler cranes, they have to be washed, okay? And so that's what I wanted to say about shipping used equipment. So proper documentation has to be clean. You need 72-hour notice. You need to have the ITN number to give it to the carrier, and you need to know the port, the border crossing, where you'll be crossing. And by the way, there's another little trick here. If you're shipping a machine that has to be broken down and loaded on 2 or 3 trucks, let's say it's a big crane, and usually like the main body of the crane goes on an RGN, and then the rest, like crawlers and counterweights and booms, they go on flatbed step deck trucks, right? Or another RGN. They all have to cross, I'm pretty sure, at the same border crossing. So let's say if they're coming from, let's say, Maryland or something, and they're crossing through Queenston-Lewiston Bridge between Ontario and New York, all other trucks have to cross at the same. I think it's best they all cross at the same spot. Like I know the first truck can cross anywhere. Like you can tell them, hey, I want to cross here, I want to cross here. But then the rest of the trucks for the same shipment must cross at the same location, because it's called, it's a multiple shipment. And it'll create a lot of problems if one of the trucks tries to cross at another port. So it's pretty complicated compared to moving a piece of machinery just inside US, right? Because despite what some people think, Canada is still a foreign country, right? When you load in the States, you go to Canada, you go into a foreign country, right? So there's a border, you deal with CBP, Customs and Border Protection on the US side, and then you deal with Canadian Customs on the Canadian side. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of things to look out for, but hopefully this video will shed some light on this procedure and help you avoid mistakes when shipping equipment and machinery to Canada. Thanks for watching.